medical model, it took me my whole career to learn this, does not work for the individual. Might work for some populations. So if you treat blood pressure at a population level, yes, you might get the numbers coming down, but there's a cohort who it ain't going to work for.
Yeah.
And if you understand the context of what's going on with them, so they're not sleeping at night, the house has been repossessed, the banks are after them, they've got a horrible marriage, the kids have started using drugs, the dog is dying.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where we need to understand. We need to give advice that is actually going to make a difference. It is going to have an outcome that is measurable, and the outcome matters to the person who you're giving the advice to.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Welcome to today's episode of When You Choose You podcast. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Donal Collins. Donal is Irish with a very strong background in GP care in UK. Am I right? Welcome to the show. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
No, pleasure. Thank you so much. So, as you said, I qualified in Cork, 1989, worked in Limerick Hospital, which of course is always in the news these days. We were not so much in the news back then, but demand was a lot less back then. We were still really busy, but we didn't have the issue with beds down the corridors. But we had the issues with the 120-hour week, which was a normal working time at that time. But at the end of that 5 years, which was very formative for me and actually a huge learning curve in medicine, surgery, ENT, which became a special interest for me later on. I then couldn't get a job in Ireland, strangely.
Wow.
Because back then,
hard to believe.
I know,
thinking
hard to believe.
Of the current reality in Ireland.
I know. And then I went to the UK and they opened me with wide arms. Having, qualified, done all the training, we speak the same language. So I finished off my GP training program there and then got into a practice, became a partner. And then over the years, general practice has evolved fantastically, particularly in the UK. So I've lost a little bit of touch of what's happening in Ireland. But I think what's impressed me with the UK is the sort of data-led healthcare that's going on now. And then that allows you to be responsive, and it also allows you to do amazing things in preventative care,
yes,
particularly in the region of metabolic ill health. So when I started in primary care, we used to have these paper notes called Lloyd George. So Lloyd George was a standard size of card. We used to write on them. There was lots of little humorous pictures and doodles from GPs over the years. And of course, all that art history has disappeared with everything
AI,
being on the computer now.
Digital, yeah.
But the beauty of the computer is data. It's data rich. So in the UK, if I go into a population of 40, 50,000, I know how many people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, with pre-diabetes. I'll be able to pick out those with raised triglycerides. I'll be able to pick out those who are overweight and hypertensive. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to pick out those who are maybe overweight, hypertensive, and have a mental illness.
Yes, okay. We'll touch on that in a second. So the reason because I called Dr. Collins today is because he is very focused on metabolic health, like I am, as you know by now. And I wanted to bring you a perspective of a GP, a medical care practitioner who has serious background in working with people. And I'm going to say, Donal, you dealt with that yourself from a personal level. So you had the skin on the game, is it?
Exactly. So about 8 years ago, I was involved in what was called the NHS Vanguards. So it was when the leader of the NHS, called Simon Stevens, said, we've done well to get to where we are, but the population is getting sicker, older, more overweight, and and we need to do something different. And he asked for anyone in the country to put their hand up to say, are you up for doing something? So we were one of the areas, and I put my hand up, which was both good and bad, right? So good that we were actively doing something to try and understand what was happening and do something different. The bad was you're still running a general practice. So it was almost like doing a full-time job and then taking on another half-time job on top of it. So you had some paid sessions out. So I was allowed 2 sessions a week out. But the reality was it was probably 5 or 6 sessions a week of activity.
What that activity involved?
So lots of meetings, lots of learning, seeing what happened in other countries, what worked in other countries. Could we bring that into the UK? But particularly it was about understanding our population, understanding the activities we were doing, and was it actually making a difference to the outcomes?
Okay.
Because sometimes you end up, as I have done over my career, running faster and faster on the hamster wheel, and you're just getting nowhere.
Yeah.
It looks like you're working really busy, really hard, but the outcomes are not improving. And that was hard to swallow. And sometimes it's worthwhile just taking a step back. But again, during this period, I myself developed a totally preventable chronic illness. Okay. And I was involved in a system that was trying to prevent chronic illness in others.
Can I, because I'm a coach and I like the psychology of things and what's going on behind that, what do you think was causing that for you? If you can share, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So one was I was desperate to do something that mattered and made a difference. So I put in a lot of hours at work. I didn't have much downtime. I didn't have much breaks in between what was going on, because often what would happen is you'd have a meeting before the surgery where you'd be talking online to many others. Then you'd have your morning surgery. Then you'd probably have another conversation about the Vanguard work. Then you'd have 5 or 6 home visits. Then you'd have another surgery. And then you'd have meetings in the evening.
Yeah.
Right. We had amazing patients back then, because they became like friends. You got to know them over the years. And with love, they would give you lots of presents. So there was always cakes, biscuits, sweets, continuously available. And growing up in Ireland, I always liked my cup of tea. The receptionist knew I liked my cup of tea, but then they'd always bring the cup of tea with the biscuit, the cake, sweets. So I was grazing continuously all day long. And without being really self-aware, my weight was piling on. But interestingly, the heavier I got, the hungrier I got.
Okay.
So sometimes you'd find on those home visits, we don't have any Supermacs over in the UK yet, but we've got loads of McDonald's drive-through. And what would be amazing is that you'd be going around absolutely ravenous, even though I probably had about 5-6 months of energy stored inside my abdomen. Drive through the takeaway, get a big double burger, big chips, Coke. And then an hour later, I was hungry again.
Wow.
And then you think, how's that possible?
Wow.
Right? I've just eaten 2,500 to 3,000 calories, right? Because it's all about the calories.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely starving.
You forget about those things when you are having a healthy lifestyle. I was very much like that when I was in college and all of that, but I'm not even I'm not want to talk about it. But you forget about those things, and it's so obvious for us, but it's not obvious when you're in the middle of it.
No, not at all. Because the hunger was driving you and it was interrupting you psychologically. So if you go to a meeting and that hunger is eating away at you, you can't concentrate, you can't focus on what's going on, and it needs to be fixed. But actually, on reflection on what was going on back then, it has been great learning for me, because now when I meet people who are going through what I was going through, I totally get it. And yet the system will say, you've become 30, 40 kilograms overweight. You're eating all this food all day long. It is your fault, right? You are
Your
lazy.
body's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You know,
something wrong with you.
You're lazy. You just need to sit back from the table, eat less, move more. All right. And about 30 years ago, the Royal College of GPs in the UK collected a lot of data from primary care. Eat less, move more is 99.2% likely to fail as an intervention.
Okay. Do we know why?
Because it doesn't work.
Okay, because it's not true.
Because I'm starving. So if you tell me to eat less, I'm still starving.
Okay.
You haven't fixed the root problem.
Okay. I like that. Yeah.
Right. And then the other
I'm
thing.
fascinated, by the way. Like that, I'm so quiet and I'm listening. I'm absorbing every word.
And the other thing is, if you tell me to eat less, the hunger is driving me to eat more. So which will win, the hunger or you? Hunger's going to win every time.
Of course.
All right. And then the other thing is move more. And what I didn't realize then was, my mitochondria were shot, right? I had poisoned them to hell. I had no energy. So if you're going to then tell me, hop on a bike and let's do a 100-mile ride on a weekend, or park run is a great thing. But, when you're about 40 kilograms overweight, going on a 5K run and you haven't run for a long time, that's really hard.
And that's where I'm going to say something for the listeners. That's where we go to the gym as a first move when we want to change the lifestyle. And we try to pump and to do this and to push harder because we have a great coach there saying, God bless them all. I love them, but they need to be a little bit more physiologically aware of what happens. And like I said, why the gym first? Why not food first and then gym?
Marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the gym,
I said it. I never publicly admitted that's my belief, but that's my belief.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And to be honest, some of it may well be self-punishment.
Yeah.
Because you go to the gym, you're trying to do stuff you can't. You haven't, the battery power isn't there. You beat yourself up. Maybe they're right. It is, I'm greedy, I'm sloth-like. I've all the 7 deadly sins. That's what's wrong with me. And that's why I'm here. So a bit of beating myself up might be why you go to the gym. Or, back then, there was once a year, there was this 110k cycle around the New Forest near us in the UK. So I used to try and do that. So despite being massively overweight, and so I would cycle 100 miles a week, 5 times 20 miles. What happened to my weight?
Nothing.
And yet everyone would tell me I'd lose weight if I did that. Absolutely nothing. And I think that's where we need to understand. We need to give advice that is actually going to make a difference. It is going to have an outcome that is measurable. And the outcome matters to the person who you're giving the advice to.
100%. Thank you. Can you say that again?
The advice must improve the outcome that matters to the person you're giving it to.
Yeah.
All right. Because this is about improving other people's lives. It's really nice to do work that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
All right. And that's a really good place to be. That prevents burnout. If you turn up to work, you're doing something that is amazingly good and you're improving the health of a population. I can't, there's a great feeling behind that. But it's all about the people you're helping. If you don't delve into their context, listen to what matters to them, you're going to achieve nothing.
And that's where the bio-individuality matters so much.
And that's why a medical model, it took me my whole career to learn this, does not work for the individual. It might work for some populations. So if you treat blood pressure at a population level, yes, you might get the numbers coming down, but there's a cohort who it ain't going to work for.
Yeah.
And if you understand the context of what's going on with them, so they're not sleeping at night, the house has been repossessed, the banks are after them, they've got a horrible marriage, the kids have started using drugs, the dog is dying.
Yeah.
Right? And then you say...
And that's life.
Eat less, move more.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's amazing. So amazing piece of awareness. Thank you so much for that.
But it took me my whole career.
Okay. So you fixed, I know it's a wrong term, but you fixed yourself or your problem. And what next?
So what happened was I was getting increasingly tired. At the end of the day, I could not wait to get into bed. Just could not wait to get into bed and rest because I was absolutely shattered. I didn't realize that I'd become, frankly, type 2 diabetic at this stage. Eventually, I got some bloods done and then saw my GP in England who I personally knew. So he was frank with me and used an expletive, said, "You're a fat bleep. You need to lose weight to improve this, and here's some drugs." So he put me on a drug called metformin, entirely appropriate. And at that time in England, there was a weight loss, well-known weight loss brand with 2 letters now, were funded to help people lose weight. So I brought them into my surgery. I queued up with my patients every Thursday night. And after about 4 or 5 months, lost 5 kilograms. It was tough. I was still hungry. But the magic 5 kilograms happened, and all the papers say once you lose 5 kilograms, because it's all about the obesity, you will improve.
Okay.
I repeated my bloods done, and in fact, I'd gotten marginally worse.
Oh.
All right. Now, I can't tell you how disappointing that was because
I'm sorry. I feel the pain.
Right. And yet the weighing scales were saying, woohoo, we're winning. The bloods were saying, despite being on the medication and losing the weight. And I thought, maybe they're right. This is a chronic progressive condition. It's going to get worse. And I just have to keep taking a lot more medication as the years go by. It was a thoroughly depressing time.
And that's where creates room for more medication.
Correct. But then an amazing thing happened, right? 2 individual patients came, probably a couple of weeks apart, both of them from Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really interesting if you're into metabolic ill health. Southeast Asians are very different to Caucasians. A lot to do with the fat cells, and we can go into the detail of that if you want. But these guys were thin. Okay, the BMI 21. If they turned sideways, they didn't have a belly that stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
They both had HbA1cs over 100. Okay, for the audience, if you have a HbA1c over 48, you have type 2 diabetes. HbA1c gives you an average number of how sugary your blood is over the last 3 months.
Okay.
All right. So over 100 is really bad. Okay, there's no kind of trying to fluff it up a bit and be nice. And I arrogantly told them, you need drugs and we need to put you on drugs now. And both of them happened to be engineers. Right? And they said this strange word to me saying, we'd like to try and fix root cause. Right? I'd never heard of root cause in type 2 diabetes before. And I said, yeah, sure, go do whatever you want. And but we're going to have to put you on drugs when you come back. And that was my attempt at shared decision making with them. But they came back, and one of them got his HbA1c down into the 30s, and the other one got it down into the low 40s.
Wow.
And I hadn't given them any medication.
So what was initially?
Over 100.
Oh, over 100. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And we keep telling people it's about losing weight. These guys didn't have weight to lose. So they stayed the same weight.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of calorie, they stayed eucaloric. So they had the same amount of calories. And I said, but, because now I had skin in the game, right? This was really interesting. What have you done? He said, it's easy. I just stopped eating chapatis and I stopped eating rice and I ate a lot more ghee. So ghee is clarified butter, very popular in the Southeast Asian community. And I was stunned because that would be the exact opposite advice to what we would be giving, right? Rice is healthy and chapatis should be fine, but ghee is definitely bad. And yet they had reversed their disease. And you think, what's going on? So I looked up, were there any papers on this? And actually I found several hundred papers on it. Loads of papers out there about it. And I thought, how come I haven't come across this before? And, we're not offering this as a possibility. And I said, maybe it was just these two guys. So I tried it on myself. And for the first time in 15, 20 years, the hunger disappeared.
Wow.
Right? The freedom that gave me was amazing. Just having this huge weight on my shoulders, constantly shouting in your ear, eat food, suddenly lifted. And then about 15, 20 kilograms just fell away. I didn't even try. Did not try.
Yeah, that's the beauty about it. Like, exactly. I hear that on a daily basis. And even the hunger. Like, I'm just surprised. I'm not hungry. And I said, yeah, I know what we expect, really.
So then I repeated my bloods. HbA1c had come down into the low 40s. So no longer type 2, still in the pre-diabetic range, and I'm still a work in progress.
And that was in an interval of?
That would have been over about 4 or 5 months.
Okay. Wow.
Exactly. Wow. And then I started doing this with the patients who happened to come into the room, and similar dramatic results. But it was strange, because how did this fit into a standard medical model versus what we were doing? We had set clinics up to put people on medications. You're hypertensive, you need to go on the medications. We monitor you. We come to a diabetic clinic. We've now, in the UK, there's these things called QOF points. So there's a checklist. You have to tick off all these things that you've done and add more medications to improve glycemia, which interestingly doesn't reduce your cardiovascular risk that much.
Okay.
But if you do the other things, it dramatically improves your cardiovascular risk. And then this concept of eating different foods didn't really fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
There was no incentive. There was no payments for it. There's a little payment for making sure everyone with type 2 diabetes gets their bloods done, gets the blood pressure medication, gets the feet tickled, gets pictures done on their eyes. So all entirely appropriate stuff will be incentivized, but there's no incentive for putting someone into diabetic remission.
Okay.
Zip.
Still? Okay.
Zero. Okay. And yet, if you go from being a type 2 diabetic to not being a type 2 diabetic, your contact with the health service in the following year will drop by about 4 or 5 appointments.
Exactly. And that should be an incentive in itself for the system.
Yeah. And if you do it with one person, system
if
won't
you are
really...
looking from this side of things, if you are looking from the other side of things, not really.
Exactly. So then, the thought was, how can I get to people who don't happen to just accidentally come into my room?
Mm-hmm.
And it was around this time I was coming up to a point where I said, I've had my career in general practice, but for the last bit of my career, I just want to do something a little bit different. So I knocked on the door of 6 digital providers who were involved in metabolic health to say, would you be interested in working with me on a population health management service?
That was what year-ish?
This would have been just pre-COVID.
Okay. So recent years, yeah.
So 5 of them said you can be a reseller.
Okay, very good.
All right. But that really wasn't what I was interested in. It was about how can we intervene in populations and improve health. And then...
You were not a typical GP. Let's put it straight. You definitely were not. Like, probably was bigger the challenge that you went through it personally, and that challenged you, motivated you, but definitely very eye-opening experience, I'd say.
And then I had a conversation with this organization, happens to be Irish, happened to be based in Cork, a bunch of engineers and a cardiologist. And they said, that sounds fascinating. So we had a chat, we got together, we agreed to work on a project, no finance involved, just to see how we'd get on. I found a local GP in the UK who said he'd be interested in doing something. with his population, their inner city. It was in Portsmouth, just north of Portsmouth, so a very deprived community. It would be exactly the community who most people would say digital intervention will not work.
Oh,
all right,
okay.
Because this population had a reading age of 12. Okay, so in terms of newspapers, so broadsheets, you need a reading age of about 18. Okay. So if you've got a reading age of 18, you can read things like the Times and Telegraph. But if you've got a reading age of 12, you can only read the red tops.
Okay.
So if you're trying to get across a concept of metabolic health, improving your health, diet, and other things that you can do to improve your health, these guys ain't going to get it, would be the view.
Mm-hmm.
And then we said to him, to make it a little bit harder, can you give us your out of control, polypharmacy, multimorbid, so lots of conditions, and these are the people who you've already tried everything on, and you're just following them up. All right. But with the reality of, I can't do any more. We're just doing the annual checks because that's what we're told to do.
Yeah.
So within 4 months, there was an average 20% drop in HbA1cs. There was a drop in blood pressure. There was a drop of about 5 kilograms in weight across the 40 people involved. Some of our best performers were those who didn't have digital access. All right. So one lady had an iPhone 4. I didn't realize it at the time, but accessing digital content on an iPhone 4 is not a good idea.
It's not a good idea, yeah. I agree.
Okay. So we sent her a text every week with an embedded video. She was our best performer.
Wow.
All right. And this is exactly the person who the system would say, no point, ain't going to work. They'll say it very quietly, these people are too stupid. They're not going to be able to do this. All right. Is an impolite way of saying what people are really thinking.
Okay.
But these were amazing people. They were salt of the earth. They knew they'd gotten into a bad place and they didn't know how to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the unintended consequences were amazing. So one guy who had chronic leg ulcers for the previous 4 years, they magically disappeared.
Wow.
3 who were unemployed for the previous 10 years got jobs. I can't say causation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. But if you think about it, energy improves.
Of course.
Sleep improves. Your ability to do stuff improves.
Absolutely.
And this project was done in the first lockdown. Okay.
Okay. So we were talking about first lockdown. Okay.
So
we are coming towards where we are.
Yeah. And this was the sort of guy who said, yeah, but it won't work in our population. I know it works somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But the reality is wherever you do this, you're going to get the same numbers. So with that data, we were then able to go to other areas, and primary care networks took us on. So in the UK, general practice is bunched into what's called primary care networks. So that's populations of 40 to 50,000, where the practices agree to collaborate to improve the health of the population and manage them in an at-scale way. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so initially, when the other people took us on, it was more around a workforce issue where they couldn't recruit, demand was high. And then when we presented the outcomes back to them, they said, oh, we didn't really know you could do that. And all the contracts have increased in terms of activity and hours.
Okay.
So today, what we can show with you is our 1 year data from 3 primary care networks, so across 150,000 population of type 2s.
So it's quite large. Yeah.
Quite large. So we do a data search. We segment the population. The GPs say, can you intervene on these particular people? And so I'm just going to open up the screen here and just get the numbers because they're fairly new numbers. In the UK, your diabetic bloods will be done on the month of your birthday.
Okay.
Typically, a year apart. Okay, so that's the annual review.
Just to make sure that I understood correctly. So if you have the yearly review and your numbers are not okay, and you want to do something, do you have to wait to be tested again a year, or you can actually have that checked?
So on the whole, the answer will be mostly you'll wait.
Okay.
Some will intervene if those who have a significant interest will recheck earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But on the whole, if your HbA1c is in the 60s and 70s, it's been that way for a number of years, and you're on a number of drugs,
Yes.
it's just going to be yearly checks.
Yeah.
But if they put you on something that will drop your sugar, so if they put you on insulin, on a drug called glycoside, now it's a safety issue, so you need to monitor it.
Oh, okay. So if you are on drugs, you have to be monitored. If you are
Certain
on lifestyle,
drugs.
Certain drugs.
All right, but
My apologies. Certain drugs.
Right, if you're on metformin,
Mm-hmm.
that won't cause a precipitous drop in glucose.
Okay.
If you're on an SGLT2, so it's a medication that makes you urinate glucose,
Mm-hmm.
that won't cause a precipitous drop in glucose.
Okay.
So things like insulin and glycoside, they're the two medications that could cause a precipitous drop,
Yes.
and you need to keep an eye on that. They're the ones that might be looked
Okay.
at. But for the vast majority, it's going to be once a year.
Okay.
So we had to wait more than a year for having T0, which is the first blood done before we intervened, to having T1.
T1. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then collating all the numbers. And we've used a PhD student in Cork, mathematics, to try and put this together into a semblance.
So we will put this data in the podcast. So make sure that people, if they want to see the charts, they will be there.
And so just headlines are HbA1c drops by about 10 across the whole population,
Mm-hmm.
which is about a 16% drop. You get an average of about 5 kilogram weight loss across the whole population. Okay, so that means some will do a lot more, some will do a lot less.
Okay.
But across the whole, it's about 5 kilograms.
And what are the interventions? That's
Okay.
one question. And the second question is, if people are not lucky to go to a doctor in UK and we are in Ireland, can you do this at home yourself at your own devices, and how?
So there's a website you can go to, controldtx.com, which is the website of the company I work for. I'm now CMO of that company in the UK. Currently, it does a lot of corporate work.
Mm-hmm.
So screening and intervention in the corporates. Mainly, pre-COVID, they were involved with some primary care centres around the country, but once COVID came along, that sort of disappeared, and it's selling, from a business point of view, selling direct to consumer is a lot of hard work compared to selling to business.
Okay.
For a variety of reasons. But I'm sure if there's a reasonable number of people who want help, we can.
That's why you need the health coaches in Ireland.
Exactly. And then interestingly, total cholesterol drops, LDL drops, and triglycerides drop significantly.
Okay.
All right.
Can you explain a little bit, because I would like to have an opinion from a doctor, medical physician, why triglycerides are important and why are not paid attention to as much in the current medical care.
Okay. So triglycerides are critical, okay, in terms of lifestyle intervention. So there's a thing called odds ratios. I don't know if you've come across odds ratios, but it's sort of a risk of something happening to you. So if your LDL is raised, the pharmaceutical companies, from all their research, have told us the odds ratio of you developing cardiovascular disease is 1.4. So 40% higher risk of something happening to you. And we spend billions on that. Triglycerides, if your triglycerides are raised and continuously raised, the odds ratio is 2.1.
Oh, wow.
All right. So really high. Do we pay attention to it?
Not really, as far as I'm concerned. I do, but like...
Correct.
Yeah.
Why don't we pay attention?
I don't know. I'm afraid to make any call because I don't know the
Up until recently,
I can make assumptions, but I'm not...
Up until recently, there wasn't a drug. There is a drug now, but it's really expensive and doesn't fix root cause. Now, is it the triglycerides that are causing the problem? No. Okay, it's a marker of an underlying problem going on. And then there's another marker that gives you an odds ratio of 6.2.
Wow.
We don't measure it.
It's ApoB.
No. ApoB is a cousin of the LDL. All right.
Yes.
So ApoB will give you an odds ratio of around 1.6.
Okay.
So it's better than LDL as a marker. Insulin, if you have hyperinsulinemia chronically, odds ratio is 6.2 of developing cardiovascular disease. We don't measure it. Why do we measure it?
Yeah, exactly. Because
there's no drug.
Okay.
There's no drug to bring a hyperinsulinemic levels down to a normal.
So,
but they are foodable. Okay?
Correct. That's one thing. But ApoB1, no, not ApoB1, the AB1C, it's not insulin. It's glucose. Okay.
HbA1c is technically glycosylated hemoglobin.
Okay.
So it's sugar attached to your red blood cell. Your red blood cell only lives for 3 months. So when you get your HbA1c done, it gives you an average picture of what's been happening with sugar in the last 3 months.
Okay.
Whereas finger prick glucose can change from minute to minute. All right. But HbA1c will just give you an average.
Okay.
Picture. But triglycerides, insulin are totally foodable. If you eat the right foods, they will dramatically come down.
Okay.
In a manner that is much stronger than any medication could ever do. And again, it comes back to those 2 engineers that I met all those years ago, because you're fixing root cause. You're not treating a symptom of the underlying problem, which is what we, in medicine, we do a lot of. We treat the symptom of the underlying.
Totally, yeah. I think this is the problem. I hate putting that word. Like, this is the thing with the medical care system is not a health care, is a symptom care.
So it's a sickness service.
Or it's a service.
Right? It's not a health service.
Yeah. Totally. Like, health is more than not having a symptom. To me, is thriving. Like, having all your ducks in a row. Now, I know it's probably an ideal and we are all moving towards it at some stage, but definitely healthcare is not only the absence of the disease.
No. And that's why this concept of salutogenesis, or creating health, is really important. If you take an approach of creating health in an individual, you push the symptoms of the disease away, and you push the disease away, and you push the need for medications away.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit of fear in the medical care professionals field that, okay, what will happen with us then if we get to the root cause and fix the problem?
So I don't think we'll...
like, I don't know, this is a pure assumption, but I guess it is, because when you feel the need of being right so strong when it comes to medication, and something has to explain that. And to me, it's only the fear.
Okay, so if you go back to my education, admittedly in the 80s, how much lifestyle education did I get?
An hour or nothing?
Nothing.
Not even, yeah.
Zip. Okay, so, but interestingly, a lot of the metabolic pathways that I understand now were taught very well in physiology back then.
Okay.
And in biochemistry. All right. But then for many, many years, we stopped using them, so we stopped remembering them.
Yeah. But biochemistry is only studied 1 year in the first year, is it? Or in the second?
Second. Well, 2. Second, 2 years, so it was... so when I did it, there was a thing called pre-med as well. So, but in year 1 and year 2.
Yeah. I did 1 year of medical school. And after that, I gave up. Not because I didn't want to, because of personal circumstances, but yeah, I remember that was one of the grounds of... Yeah.
And so as most medics will want to do if they're going to do investigations or interventions, it's about knowing what to do with the answer. So if we do a lifestyle investigation and then I get a number back like insulin, for instance, being really high, I haven't got a drug to deal with that. Right? So what does it mean? So when a patient comes in and I say, well, your insulin's quite high, and I know that's a risk for cardiovascular disease and many other conditions, but frankly, I haven't got a tool to improve it. It's better not to do the test.
Okay. We are going now in a nitty-gritty of things, because to me is, okay, I'm going to the GP or the doctor to get a solution or whatever, but not necessarily a drug. With my current mindset, I'm looking for a solution. The GP or the doctor says, okay, I can't give a solution if I don't give a drug.
Because everything is geared up towards medications on the whole.
Okay.
Right? There's an increasing number of people who are understanding lifestyle and doing these interventions now compared to before. But on the whole, the most powerful thing a GP has is the prescription pad.
Yeah, correct.
All right.
Yeah.
And on the whole, most people go for the prescription pad.
100%. Yeah.
All right.
That's I wanted to stress that it's with my current mindset, I'm not looking necessarily for a prescription, but.
And that's where this concept of shared decision making comes in, so that it's well evidence-based. If you do a good shared decision-making with patients, you get better outcomes. So that will be around learning the context of who you are and what it is you want to do to improve your health. And then that'll base, is it a prescription pad I need to be looking for, or is it something else?
Yeah, exactly.
And increasingly in the UK, there's a lot of evidence-based coming into other things. So one of the best interventions for depression and anxiety is being a member of a choir. It is far more powerful than any antidepressant.
I am not surprised. I had here a soprano, and we were agreeing that nervous system regulation when you hum and when you sing is the best nervous system regulation tool what you can use.
But I think it's also more than that. I think it's being part of
the obvious, that's complete. Yeah.
And then you're creating something wonderful that you probably thought you couldn't create before.
Mm.
And then real connection with people as well. So there's probably a lot going on when you're in a choir. But that intervention costs almost nothing.
Yeah.
There are choirs all around us.
And as you said, the problem is that those interventions are not really incentivized, is it? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now in the UK, there are increasing numbers of things called people called social prescribers.
Mm-hmm. That's the same in Ireland, I think.
Yeah. So then they can highlight or even hold your hand and bring you to a choir, bring you to a gardening club, bring you to the local walking, to try and connect you with other people. And they have huge value. And in the UK, they've shown a return on investment in social prescribers is 4.1. All right. So for every £1 spent on a social prescriber, return on investment is fourfold.
Okay. It's big.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. We can boast that ours is 10.1.
Okay. Tell us more.
So typically what we do in a practice is we'll go in, we search the databases, we segment the population, and then we ask the GPs, who do they want us to intervene on?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the decision is made by the GP.
Correct.
Okay.
So we are lifestyle, they have clinical responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be in charge of medications, blood tests, intervening. We'll look at the blood tests, we'll adjust lifestyle interventions, but we do not intervene on medications, though we can highlight to say, gosh, your blood sugars are coming down really fast. It might be worth the conversation with your GP about stopping some of these medications.
Yeah. Do you think that your power is because you are a team of cardiologists, GP, and
Absolutely. So if you like, the concept of a multidisciplinary team.
I'm a big believer in that then anyway, because I don't see even my profession won't work as well as part of a team?
So I think the ones that make the biggest difference are the engineers.
Yeah.
All right, because they're about flow. Okay, so it's how can we here's this volume of people, we need to get them through an intervention.
Mm-hmm.
How can we flow them so that they get to the right place first time, every time? How can we maximize the effect of the invite? So when we get the population we're going to intervene on, we send out a text message that comes from the practice. So it will be like, Dr. Murphy here, as you know, you've had type 2 diabetes for the last 4 or 5 years. We're doing a new innovative approach that I think will significantly benefit you. Here's a little video link. Click here, plays a 30-second video, explains what happens. But then there's 5 messages that go out. So if you say yes to the first one, you don't receive the others.
Okay.
All right. So this is where the flow is important, because if you keep getting bombarded by messages, you get turned off.
Yeah.
And if you don't respond to the first, then you get the second. And if you don't respond to that, and then after 5, we stop.
Okay.
And then...
So the message goes direct to the patient?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So it's through the computer system, text message to their phone on the whole. And then if they say yes, they turn up to a health coach appointment.
Mm-hmm.
One is to confirm it is who we think it is.
Yes.
All right. And then that they had the condition that the computer says it has, because very rarely errors happen.
Yeah, we know. It happens, yeah.
And then making sure they can onboard to our site, which has a lot of video education around how you develop metabolic ill health, how you develop type 2 diabetes, how you can turn this around. So it's like a Netflix of videos that you can either binge in one night, as you might with a series on Netflix, or you can do it more slowly.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the health coach, unlimited health coach appointments over the following year. But on the whole, we find 3 health coach appointments is enough. But that's up to the patient. Okay, the patient decides when the appointments are and how often they are.
Mm-hmm.
But on the whole, at the 3rd appointment, the patient says, I've got it now.
Okay.
It's been nice knowing you, but if I ever need you, I can come back. And that's really important because we all fall off the bike.
Yes, correct.
So when we fall off the bike, sometimes you need a hand to lift you up and get you back on the bike again.
And which is very normal. Let's state
totally normal.
Totally normal.
It's the human condition of recurringly failing.
Yeah.
That is normal behavior. And then we have a webinar every Thursday evening where typically 150 people turn up. Myself and Andy, the science guy, might go through what's been in the news of late, because usually, certainly in the UK, with one particular newspaper called the Daily Mail, they'll have a story one day that says eggs are really bad, and then a week later they'll have a story that says eggs are really good.
Okay.
Right. And is it no wonder we're all totally confused?
Why do you think, in regard to nutrition, it's so much confusion?
I think there's many reasons. One is we don't...
Because God bless them, I don't even want to think what's in the mind of... I have my own... My mind is made and I know what is working because it's working, and that's it. I don't question. But my God, the people are so bombarded with.
So I think we'll come back to why. Let's just finish what we do with the population. And then in that webinar, it's an Ask Me Any Question for the next 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's questions flooding in through the chat, and then we try and get through all of them, but we certainly will get through the ones that are going to benefit the most throughout this. And then it's measure the outcome. So measure what matters to the patients. Is my health improving? Are my sugary levels, HbA1c, improving? Is my blood pressure staying under control? Is my waist circumference shrinking? Proxy measure for this is the weighing scales. Not enough of us put a tape around the middle. It is probably the single best measurement you can do.
Yeah.
All right.
We agree on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's free and cheap.
Yeah.
And easy. And then is my lipid profile improving, particularly triglycerides. And if you want to be a little bit technical, triglycerides over HDL ratio. That is a proxy marker for insulin resistance.
Okay.
So if your triglycerides are really high and your HDL is really low, you're going to have a high number. If you get your insulin resistance under control, that naturally reduces. Triglycerides come down, HDL often increases. And then it's money has been spent on us to intervene. Can we show we have made a difference? And overwhelmingly, I think with the data that we believe we have. I've shown it to a pharmaceutical manager who says, I asked him, what would this drug be called if you had a drug intervention that does this? And he said it would be called a blockbuster.
Oh, wow.
Right. And what are the side effects?
Nothing.
You
The
know,
side effects are positive.
on the whole, yeah. So at the beginning, as you adjust, if you are very insulin resistant, very overweight, you may find yourself urinating a lot, so blood pressure can drop. Some people, when you adjust food, you may get a bit constipated.
Yeah.
So that's probably the bulk of it. The riskier is if you're on lots of medications and you create health and you're still on lots of medications, then you end up getting lots of side effects from the medications.
Yes, okay.
All right. So that's where if you're going to get into polypharmacy and do this intervention, you need to have a practice who will say, we're happy to accept the increase in workload of deprescribing these medications as it happens. And in a system that's very stressed, sometimes it's not as straightforward as you might think.
Yeah.
But I think, so going back to your other point about why is there so many confusing messages out there? One is that the research is awful. Research in nutrition is horrendous. All right. A lot of it is associational. A lot of it is based on memory recall. Can you fill in this food questionnaire of what you've eaten? And then we'll see what diseases you collect over time, which relies on many things. It relies on my memory being really good on what I've eaten in the last week. I can barely remember what happened yesterday.
Yeah. Like I have a system in my practice where before I make the meal plan, I ask them to record their foods. But even before that, when they fill in the questionnaire, completely different story. So the questionnaire filled from the memory is one thing. The recording the foods and the drinks when I ask for 3 days is completely different things, which is mainly the reality. And then from there, I can collect data.
And again, some of the research around, meat is a popular thing to demonize. So meat is often linked. Some say it's a cause of type 2 diabetes. It's a cause of many cancers.
And the heart attack.
Yeah. But the research on this, they don't take into account what has been wrapped around the meat burger. So, right. So the bread that somehow never goes stale.
Yeah.
All right. Looks really fresh 6 months later. The onions that have been cooked in God knows what, and all the various sauces that are about 50% sugar. Then you've got the chips that probably bear no relation to the chips we might have eaten 30, 40 years ago. And then you've got your nice big sugary drink. All right. And it's the meat that's caused the problem.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So there's all sorts of confounding issues with the science. So, you could do the same there's a straight line curve with ice cream and drowning. The more ice cream that's eaten, the more drownings happen. Ice creams cause drownings. Okay. At Blackpool, it's well known that when the sun shines, there are more suicides in Blackpool.
Okay.
So does one cause the other, or is it associated? So what actually happens is sun shines in Blackpool, more people move into Blackpool. If you have more, there's sadly a certain percentage rate of suicide in a population. So if you have more people in an area, then more things will happen.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. So we need to differentiate between...
I heard that with cholesterol and heart attacks. Like they say LDL causes the heart attacks, but in fact is suspecting that they are there anyway when the heart attacks happens. The LDL is there, and it's also association more than causation. Yeah. No, I can. It's an anecdotally. I'm not backing up with any science, but
So one is if you've had a heart attack or a stroke, being on statins is a good thing. Primary prevention is less clear. And I think statins do anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
They also improve thrombotic risk. All right. But the thing that you can measure is the cholesterol. So that's what they focus on. So my belief is that if you have a perfect glycocalyx, so glycocalyx will be the lining of your blood vessels.
Mm-hmm.
If that's in a really good shape, and I think this is why some people with familial hypercholesterolemia live into their 80s and 90s, they've got a really good glycocalyx that hasn't been damaged by insulin resistance, hypertension, smoking, alcohol, all the stuff that damages the lining of your vessels. The LDL will do far less damage than it would otherwise. All right. We can go down a rabbit hole around, cholesterol is a substance we need. It's the building block for a lot of our cells. It makes hormones. We need it for our brain. So cholesterol is a good thing. The thing that we actually talk about are the carriers. All right. So LDL is like a heavy goods vehicle that moves stuff around your body, particularly cholesterol, triglycerides, and then deposits it where it needs. Now, where you were coming from is if you have an inflammatory process going on in a vessel,
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to repair that, then the LDL will be carrying stuff there to try and help repair it.
Yeah.
So you could argue if there's a lot of firemen at a fire, the outcome's going to be bad. Is it that the many firemen have caused the damage?
Mm.
Now, we're verging into an area where there's many disagreements on this, and actually disagreement is healthy. So I encourage debate.
Yeah.
But it has become a dogma.
We are on the same page as well.
It has become a dogma, and it's if you question some of these things, it can be, you're one of those.
Yes, exactly.
And then that kills any conversation. But I think if you've had a heart attack, had a stroke, had peripheral vascular disease, being on statin will reduce your risk of further events. And then we can have an academic discussion around, is it because of the anti-inflammatory and thrombotic effects, or is it the LDL? But interesting, in COVID times, people who did badly in COVID in intensive care were those with very low cholesterol levels. So we need cholesterol itself is a repair mechanism. It's how we build things back up again.
Okay. What is insulin resistance on a 5-grade language?
Okay. So we have a hormone called insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, when we eat sugar or highly processed foods that get rapidly absorbed into the gut, it causes a surge in glucose, which could come from pure glucose or glucose that's hidden in another form like starch. Then insulin rises and tends to pack this away into storage form. So when insulin is high, it's getting you ready for hibernation.
Yeah.
Okay. Putting stuff away into the storage areas. Where you run into trouble is if your storage areas are already kind of full. Right, so if your food cupboard's full, you've now brought another pile of shopping back home, right? And you're there on your own trying to pack this stuff away. Usually, you're going to need a bit more help. You're going to call in the kids. You're going to call in your husband. Say, find spaces to put this stuff away. So what you've done there is you've increased the number of packers. Okay, so if you had empty cupboards, one person could easily put it away. So with insulin resistance is if your storage areas, i.e. your fat cells, your glycogen storage, your liver, is already pretty full, you can't really pack this away efficiently. So your body says, we need a bit more insulin. So it shoves out even more insulin to try and pack this stuff away. And then over time, your body says, I'm sick and tired of this signal coming from insulin because it's kind of shouting at us all the time. So it's a bit like Mammy who's constantly nagging at home at you. You become deaf to it. You stop listening. And then your body stops listening. And then to overcome it, pancreas pushes even more. You end up with really high insulin levels for a relatively small glucose load. And that's hyperinsulinemia. And then that drives hypertension, fluid retention, inflammatory processes, because it makes your fat cells grow. So fat cells can increase two ways. You can increase in numbers, hyperplasia, or hypertrophy, which is you're pumping more air into the balloon. The hypertrophy one, if it outgrows the blood supply, it's saying, ouch, this is now hurting.
Okay.
And then that's when the inflammatory stuff pours out, your cytokines, your TNF. And then that's the stuff that causes problems with the blood vessels, coronary artery disease, brain, Alzheimer's, mental health disorders, anxiety, depression. And so the root cause is fix the insulin resistance. How do you fix the insulin resistance? Right, you reduce the things that are pushing your insulin up.
You reduce the food shopping.
So
the bags from that food shopping.
Stop putting sugar in, number one. Stop putting rapidly absorbing food. So the highly processed food gets into the front 1/3 of your gut, and then that has to go to your liver, which then drives fatty liver, and that in itself drives insulin resistance. So you need food with structure that's hard to absorb, makes your gut work. That gets past the front 1/3 of your gut. That then helps your gut microbiome, which is a whole new area that we could delve into, improve. And then the insulin levels come down, which then allows the fat cells to shrink a little bit. Your fat cells cannot grow without insulin.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Cannot grow without insulin. All right. I can't stress that enough. So when people talk about it, it's all about the calories. Off air, we talked about black swans. Okay. So the perfect, well, not the perfect, but the model that has the lowest insulin level is a newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic.
Okay.
Pancreas stopped producing insulin, zero insulin. They're pouring calories in, all right? Because one is they're very thirsty. They can't access the right energy in the right place. They could be pouring 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calories a day in. There's no insulin. They're losing weight. Okay. And so if you can get your insulin level not as low as a type 1 diabetic, but just above that, you'll magically lose weight.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is your satiety hormones come back and start working properly. So you had this strange sensation that I was missing for many years called not being hungry. And then you can do one of our rules, which is only eat when you're hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So if you're not hungry, don't eat. Don't look at the clock. If the clock is telling you to eat, but you're not hungry,
don't eat.
Don't eat.
Yeah.
And then people in the UK that we work with, they go from eating about 7-8 times a day with all the snacks. So you'll have your breakfast, lunch, evening meal, and then all the bits in between. Magically, they go to about two times a day.
Yeah.
And that's not us telling them to reduce it to 2 times a day. It's just, oh, well, you said only eat when I'm hungry, and I'm only hungry about twice a day.
Yes, exactly.
And then that's when all the magic happens. And then if you want to extend the time between those meals, you can. It's a condition called fasting.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a whole new area you can go into, and that can bring its own benefits as well for different reasons. But a lot of our people will end up doing accidental fasting, and then we can talk about autophagy and all the benefits of what that does.
What keeps you going? In the sense of what do you take from the work, what you're currently doing? You are at the age of, you can nearly retire, I guess. And you are still very much driven.
So one is, it's a problem that has a simple solution that somehow the system is not seeing. All right. And that's driving me crazy. Okay.
How do you manage that? And I'm looking at this as a piece of advice because sometimes I get so frustrated when I see the solution, I know it's working, and I can't do anything because the system is so against how I perceive it.
So again, I think it's taken me a long time to figure this out, but I think complex systems like complex solutions. right? If it can't really be that easy.
Okay.
Okay. So I think probably the way around it is go with the willing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So work with those who want to work with you. And so from that point of view, our strategy is in the UK is we're talking to GPs on the ground. We're not wasting time going up to the high levels of the NHS. We're not going into commissioning boards at a regional level, because you could spend the next 20 years talking to them and getting nowhere. And what I've learned over my career is the closer you are to the patients, the bigger the difference you can make.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Up at the other end, you will go from meeting to meeting to meeting. And if you always ask the same question, what difference have we made to Mrs. Murphy in Serpentine Street today with this meeting? Invariably, the higher up you are, the answer is going to be, we have made no difference.
No difference, yeah.
Whereas the lower down you are, the more the difference you're going to make to the people. And so what gets me up every morning is the ability to measure what matters to the patients, seeing that in real numbers that isn't influenced by investigations we do. It's investigations other people are doing, so it's independent from us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not numbers that are reported back to us. They are real health service numbers.
Yes.
And the other thing is quality improvement. So typically we're getting about 4 in 10 into a non-diabetic state. So for me is, how can
4 in 10?
Yes.
Brilliant.
In 1 year. All right. Into a non-diabetic state. So the other 6 are the things that are intriguing me.
Yes. Okay. And did they apply, did they work with you and just didn't? Okay, very interesting.
No, it could be that, so the NHS and medicine have their black lines. So if you're above 48, you're type 2.
Mm-hmm.
If you're under 48, type 2, technically 2 blood tests 3 months apart is the definition for remission.
Oh, okay.
Under 48. So, but we have a lot of people who've moved from 95, 100 down to 49.
Yeah. I had a recent client, the same, yeah.
Okay, so technically not in remission.
Yeah.
They're in a much better place. So we know...
No, I was lucky that the GP who sent her to me was like, you are in remission. But yeah, exactly.
So 78% of people are in a much better place than where they start. So I think our challenge is we haven't got a product or a drug.
Yes.
All right. It's not a new sexy injection that everyone's chasing. It's simple food as our grandparents ate it.
Correct.
90% of the foods in the supermarkets weren't available 30 years ago. That seems to match with the explosion of diabetes pandemic that we have currently.
Yeah.
And we have a very obesogenic environment. So it's hard to get away from all the poisonous food that exists. Every time you stop in a petrol station, you have to go through the snake queue. And then we have all the foods in the supermarkets that somehow don't go off.
Yes.
All right. So even like a leaf of lettuce. So we grow some lettuce at home.
Mm-hmm.
If I bring in a lettuce from our patch at home, it'll wilt within a day or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normal.
The head of lettuce from supermarket, how long?
Yeah, I bought it, I think 3 weeks ago. We went in holiday for 8 days and I saw the lettuce yesterday and it's still in pretty good shape. I'm grateful that I didn't touch it. There's a whole pile of chemicals being chucked on these foods. There's a whole new area of microplastics coming up. We don't really know what that means, but you would think if there's something in your body that probably shouldn't be there, probably isn't good for you. I saw a paper recently on some post-mortem reports where they found loads of microplastics in carotid arteries. Oh, wow.
All right. What does that mean? Don't know is the answer. In a chemistry journal, they compared different tea bags. So one particular tea bag produced about 10,000 more microplastics than another.
Than the other one, yeah. Well, it was the greediness what brought us here, or what?
Money drives a lot of
Money
things,
drives,
and
yeah.
a profit motion drives a lot. I think you're in the same area that we are. It's really hard to earn a living in this area.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's really,
Yeah.
really hard. If you're going to come to a place where you want to make money, I would say do not start here, or do not come here.
Mm.
If you want to make money, go to the city. Pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
a lot of money in there. But if you're just telling people to eat food as nature gave it to you, there isn't a lot of money to be made there. There's a lot of health creation. There's a lot of joy,
Yes, exactly.
a lot of satisfaction. You'll prevent burnout big time. Here we are on a Monday, right? If 10 years ago, if you'd seen me on a Monday, I would have been internally a nervous wreck, because Mondays were dreadful. I knew whatever was going to happen on a Monday, it was more than I could deal with.
Oh, okay.
So, I might be able to see 50, 60 people in a day, but there was about 120 who really wanted to see me.
Okay.
In the NHS system, where it's free at the point of access, you can't turn the tap off.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's sad. And it's the same in HSE, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, you're totally at the mercy of the system.
At the system and demand. And then it's so, I think it comes back to, we need a system that is data-driven, understanding why the horrendous demand we have now exists. And then if we genuinely believe in prevention, we need to incentivize people. So, I'm at the end of my career, so this isn't about me, but it will be about people like you and others, because you can do this salutogenesis, the health creation, that really can turn off the heat under that pot that's boiling over.
Yeah. Hopefully our voices will be heard at some stage.
I think it will, but it'll take time.
It will take time, yeah. But in the meantime, they will be heard by people who, like, as you said, people who are suffering, and it can be easier for them, definitely. And that suffering is not necessary. It's not mandatory. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for taking time on the Monday morning. And I hope you listeners out there, you are going to get value and you are going to make better choices from today onwards. Thank you.